Clozapine was a life changer for me. Let me just ask you right out, Dr. Katie, what is clozapine?
Clozapine is an antipsychotic in the class of atypical antipsychotics that, interestingly enough, in May of 2018, we still cannot explain why it works. Because it does not work like the classic typical or even the classic atypical antipsychotics.
Would you like to tell us the difference between typical and atypical antipsychotics in brief?
Sure. The typical antipsychotics were those that came out in the 50s and on. Chlorpromazine or Thorazine was the first. And they are potent dopamine 2 blockers, and that's what they do. And the notion is, with this dopamine hypothesis of schizophrenia, if you block the dopamine receptor, dopamine cannot hit it, and therefore if you have too much, it modulates the system, and therefore the psychosis is treated. Subsequently, in the 1980s, the atypical antipsychotics emerged.
I believe clozapine was first?
One
of the first.
It was, I believe it was the first, and hardly ever used because it was considered a dirty drug and a dangerous drug.
So today, usually the atypicals are used much more often. I understand that the older ones, the typicals, can cause a condition called tardive dyskinesia.
Correct. And not only the typical ones, but the atypical ones as well.
Lesser.
In fact, I heard a statistic that in terms of the risk of tardive dyskinesia with the new atypical agents, it used to be thought to be around, I think it was 18 to 20% lifetime risk of developing this condition of tardive dyskinesia, which we can talk about. But the reason for the relatively high amount was the fact that many people who were on atypicals had first been on the typicals and then moved to the atypicals. So part of the damage over time had already been done. So now we have patients that have only been exposed to the second generation so-called atypical antipsychotics. And the rate of tardive dyskinesia lifetime risk was somewhere around 10%, so it's better.
So clozapine is the first atypical antipsychotic. Can you tell us more about what clozapine is and what makes it different from other typical and atypical medications?
Clozapine is not a potent D2 blocker. So it kind of flies in the face of the notion of the dopamine hypothesis of schizophrenia because it's really not blocking dopamine. And it is not an S2 blocker. One of the most potent binding attributes of it is the H1 or histamine receptor. It's kind of like taking a bunch of Benadryl for antihistamine effect. And the cholinergic blocker, resulting in the fact that a lot of people on clozapine drool on their pillow. And there is a solution for that, which I use in my patients on clozapine. But it's not at all like every other atypical antipsychotic, S2, D2. It doesn't work that way. And so even in Stahl's essential psychopharmacology, Dr. Stahl says, we don't know how it works. But the one thing we do know is it appears in some patients to work better than anything else. And certainly after meeting you and after I began using it, that's what my patients have experienced.